Welcome to On My Way to Wealth, the podcast where busy Gen Xers can learn financial tips as they navigate life on their way to wealth. And now, please join your host, Luis Rosa.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of On My Way to Wealth. My name is Luis, and I'm your host. Today, I have a special guest, someone I recently met, but I was very impressed with the work he's doing. And, I could tell already that he's a very kind person that cares a lot about people, their finances, and their lives in general. His name is Oliver. He is a financial advisor with Wealthspire Advisors, over a 25-year industry veteran. He's also the author of Money Can Grow on Trees, and we're going to talk about this as well. I don't want to steal your thunder, Oliver, so let me just welcome you, and I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today, and we'll get into the book a little later.
Well, thank you, Louis. Quite frankly, I somewhat got here accidentally. I went to undergraduate school at Bentley College, now Bentley University in Waltham, Massachusetts. My parents had moved back to Germany, which is where I'm originally from.
Oh, wow.
And so I didn't have a parental home to get back to. And when I graduated in December 1992, the economy was not doing well. So the only job I could get at the time was stocking shelves at Staples, the office supply store. I had rent to pay, I had a car payment, and so it was just kind of one of those things. But while I was there doing my job and working and trying to meet as many people as I could, I met a gentleman who ran a small brokerage firm. And so that's how I got into the business back in 1993.
Wow.
It's been almost 30 years. It's been great. Back in 1993, you didn't have financial advisors. You had brokers. That was it. And you sold a product. And a few years into my career, I joined Payne Weber, which is now UBS. And they were one of the originators of fee-based financial planning and fee-based asset management. And I thought, this is great. It's a flat fee. You don't have to worry about trading. You don't have to worry about selling a product. It's about servicing the client. And most importantly to me, you get paid 365 days a year, right? The fee is the fee. It doesn't matter whether you're in the office, whether you're on the golf course, whatever you're doing. As long as you're taking good care of the client and the client is happy, you're getting paid. And I thought that was a wonderful mechanism as opposed to what I grew up in, which was, hey, sell me this stock, buy that stock, sell that bond, do whatever, and generating commissions. And so it put me on the same side of the table as the client. And I thought that was very important. And that was kind of the beginning of my journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I have, in my experience, I've been doing this for about 22 years. I started when I was 10.
Exactly.
I started in 2001.
I have the gray hair, so.
Yeah, see, that'll be next. They're popping out a little bit here and there in the beard. So I think I'm headed that way, But I do remember for most of my career, about 15 years or so, it was all broker-dealer as well. And I didn't even know what an RIA was. I had just no idea that an RIA existed. I didn't know about fee-based, fee-only, nothing, right? It was all just selling products, I still operated in a sense without knowing it as more of a fiduciary, but ultimately, it was very eye-opening for me when I discovered the RIA world and the fact that you can charge flat fees and things like that. And it was, like you said, I think it definitely puts you more on the same side of the table as the client. And then you don't have to worry, and they don't have to worry about,
and to be fair, that doesn't mean that being a broker is bad. I want to say,
no, certainly not. Certainly not.
Right? That's not what it's about. But if you're an individual, an investor, who is looking for more than just tell me what stock to buy, and is looking for planning, is looking for ongoing advice, looking for guidance when it comes to, estate planning, tax planning, all these things, then the fee-only RIA structure is really the way to go, because that's the only way, in my opinion, that you're going to get that holistic, complete advice.
Agreed. Yeah, no, without a doubt. Absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. So tell me about then, once you were in it, because I remember when I first started in the industry, I realized soon how much of an impact we can have as advisors. When did you remember, because I know it was by accident to you, when you remember falling in love with it, where you're like, oh wow, like I could really help people in this?
I fell in love with it pretty early because I was very, very lucky in having a couple of very good mentors. And mentorship to me has always been an incredibly important component of passing on knowledge, passing on hopefully some wisdom, and experiences. And so I was lucky with Bob Panzer and Ardashir Ibrahimi, who were my two early mentors, um, in them guiding me. And I saw the impact that they were having. Because let's face it, when you're 24, 25 years old, you're not necessarily understanding all the things that are happening. And so being able to see it, being told it, and seeing the impact, I fell in love with this industry very, very early. And it kind of became transformational for me because as I matured and learned more and more, I decided to start getting more and more into management, which is when I started running a couple of different RIAs, and then ultimately a multifamily office before leaving the multifamily office 3.5 years ago and joining WealthSpire as an advisor again. And so I was really coaching other financial advisors more than being an advisor myself.
Gotcha. So you missed that one-on-one, huh?
I did. I missed the clients, and I had the very good fortune of having a couple of clients that that are dear friends as well, that are relatively large by any measure, in terms of account size and size of the relationship and complexity of the relationship. So the transition and becoming an advisor was relatively easy for me, not just because I had the knowledge base, but also because I had the client base to start off. And I think that's the toughest part if you're thinking about this industry. And I know we want to talk more about the investing side and the planning side towards the person who's looking for guidance. But if you're looking to enter this or any other industry, understanding the economics behind it and understanding what it takes to succeed is incredibly important, right? You've got to have that understanding and educate yourself about it, and then try to think about whether that's a path that you can succeed on. Are you built to do that or not? And if the answer is no, you're much better off kind of accepting that and finding something better to do than simply trying to force it, because that's very, very frustrating, right? I'm sure you experienced that in your career as well, Lewis.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point, and I think it brings us back to when you were talking about mentorship. Those are the kinds of people that can also help you see as well, are you on the right path, in terms of you based on what you want to do, right? And they can guide you and maybe even avoid some mistakes. It's one of the things that we love in the internship program that I created, the BLX internship, is giving people that opportunity to land that first job. And it also gives the employer the opportunity to have a candidate to see if they're a good fit for their team as well. So I think it's a win-win, right? Because people can see if this is indeed what they want to do, and then they have a pathway towards it, So that's a great point. So I wanted to ask you, so you mentioned, you came here, parents from Germany. What were some of your money memories growing up that you can remember?
Well, and at risk of being kind of self-advertising the book, Money Can Grow on Trees, when I went to college, my parents dropped me off at school. My father dropped me off at school, and my mother and sister had already moved back to Germany, and then he moved back as well. So I was on my own. And I remember very clearly walking up the stairs, and back then it was Bay Bank, Boston. I think now they're part of State Street, but who knows? But much like most colleges and universities at the time, they had booths set up and were soliciting kids to get a credit card. And I remember talking to this attractive young girl, and they have the attractive girls go try to get the guys, and the attractive guys go get the girls, right? It's a part of the sales pitch. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I have no job. I have no money. And you're going to give me a credit card? And basically the answer was, yeah, because, and this was unsaid, but you kind of figure it out later. We'll give you a credit card because if you don't pay it, we're hoping that your parents will. and somehow you'll get bailed out. And by the way, the default rates on those credit cards were incredibly low because inevitably when somebody made a mistake, the parents did bail them out, right? Now, what I got lucky because while I overspent a little bit and bought myself some nice things, when I got the bill, I was like, holy moly, this is real money. Like, where am I going to get $1,200 from to pay that bill? And then I looked and I noticed the interest rate. And the interest rate was over 18%.
Yeah.
Right? Which, think about it. That means that if you borrow $100 or charge $100 at 18% a year, I've got to pay $118 back.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. That's just insane, right? And it compounds and it builds on itself.
Interest on top of interest, yeah.
Yeah, interest on top of interest. And it's just so devastating. And so I made some financial mistakes. I was lucky that I was able to kind of get out of it and realize it before things got out of hand. But then when I got into the financial services industry and speaking with clients and having clients who inevitably had kids that were either teenagers or young adults, hearing about the same mistakes they were making that I had made allowed me to kind of talk to them on a level where we connected because I went through it recently, right? So those were the early kind of money mistakes that I made. And then, as I started investing, I remember when I got at Staples, it was a public company and they gave me stock as an employee, right? That was part of it. And I was like,
Nice.
What's this? And all of a sudden I saw the stock price go up and I was like, oh, this is nice. They gave me $400 and it's worth $600. That's kind of cool.
That's
now
really
what?
cool.
And so it kind of got me thinking in terms of, well, this kind of works out pretty well, right? And so you learn as you go. And I think the biggest lesson, and this actually goes back to high school before, but what I learned in high school is kind of an appreciation for learning. And so when you talk about internships, and we have interns here at Wellspire as well, as a matter of fact, several of them from, I guess a year and a half ago summer, since we're already in almost March. But we've hired them as now full-time employees. So exactly as you said, it gives Wellspire the opportunity. But, we're very much a learning organization and we push people to continue to learn. And, I learned some stuff. I have some early money memories, but those continue today. I'm still learning today. And I think that, again, for anybody young that's listening to this podcast, learning is a wonderful thing. And it's not quite as painful as sitting in geometry class in high school, right? Learning can be fun if you're learning about stuff that's interesting, especially when it's stuff that puts money in your pockets.
Yeah, and that you can apply in real life and make money from it, for sure. I had a similar experience to you when I went to college, freshman year, 1997. That's when I graduated high school. I remember, I don't recall anyone in my family at that point having a credit card or anything like that. Like I just was not aware of how any of that worked, right? So I do remember going to the bookstore to buy my books for the semester, and they were like wrapped in cellophane or something, like this plastic, and they actually had credit card applications inside.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like that. Yeah, I didn't have a job at the time, and I got a credit card. And I remember it was $250. It was the credit limit. And then like every 6 months, I did a review and it just kept going up. It was 500 and 1,000. Yeah. And I made a lot of mistakes myself too. I learned about compound interest the hard way because I ended up charging like my first trip to Cancun for spring break. I didn't have the money. Yep. Put it on the card. It was like this package that included airfare and hotel. It was terrible, and then I realized, once that bill comes, especially if you could only afford the minimum payment, like you'll pay so much money back. You just never dig yourself out of that hole. So it was a huge learning experience. And actually, I share those on my website because I want people to know that as an advisor, I don't know it all. I've made mistakes too, right?
Yeah,
so
we've all made mistakes. And, one of the things that I've always said is you're going to make mistakes. It's perfectly fine. I make them all the time, right? And time and discipline can fix just about every mistake out there, right? So just because you've made a mistake, don't throw up your arms and say, that's it, I'm done, I can't fix this. I may as well just keep making it worse by not doing anything, right? You can fix it. And it takes hard work and it takes time, but everything is fixable, especially money mistakes.
Yeah. And there's value in that lesson, right? If you look at it that way, it's like, all right, it's a mistake, but it's an expensive lesson.
Yeah.
Right? Consider it tuition.
Yeah.
For life. So at what point did you decide, hey, I need to put all these mistakes that I made together and come up with a way to put them in a book format so that I can help others not make the mistakes I made?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I've always enjoyed mentoring. I've always enjoyed working with other advisors, coaching, and tend to have a kind of an educational approach to the discussions that I have, whether it's with clients, potential clients, or colleagues. I was asked by a friend of mine who owned the publishing company that published a book, Imagine and Wonder, about writing a book on financial literacy. So that's how it came about. And I said to myself, okay, I think it's important. I think where the market is really missing for it is young adults and teenagers. Because if you develop good habits early, right? It's like going to the gym. If you start going to the gym when you're 15, it's a lot easier to stay fit and be in good shape, than if you start when you're 40. Same with financial literacy and financial advice. So I said the market that's missing and that's not being reached, I think, is high school students. And as we sat around, and this is, again, when some things just happen, I won't say accidentally, but with some luck. So Jackie and I were talking about the project and kind of I said, well, look, there's lots of books on financial literacy out there. How do we do this? Which, granted, is somewhat of a dry subject, right? It's not a fun read, so to
Not
say,
the most fun.
right? And nobody wakes up on Sunday morning and says, I'm going to have a cup of coffee and read about financial literacy. That's just not how it is. But so we talked about it and we said, how do we do this and not just have the same 80,000 words in a different order than the other 100 books on financial literacy that are out there? And just as I was having that conversation with Jackie, my good friend Brian Barbosa, who's the illustrator in the graphic novel, texted me. He was going to be in New York City and wanted to see if we could have lunch or a drink. And I was like, oh my God, I know he's a great illustrator. That's the way to do it. Let's make it into a graphic novel. Let's tell real stories. And so the graphic novel, the book, is 10 stories, 10 lessons. But each of those lessons are real life stories. They're either things that I experienced myself and went through, and that's how it starts, with a story of me going to college and getting the credit card and almost kind of creating or getting myself into some trouble with it, right? Or observations through my youth, friends, children of clients. And so all the 10 stories there are real life. But we want to do something that's it's real, it's somewhat different, and hopefully a little bit entertaining. So you're not just reading book. I mean, come on, compounding interest, it's important, but I'd just as soon watch grass grow. It's boring to talk about that.
Absolutely. And, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I find that in today's world, a lot of people, especially with social media, right, they tend to want things faster and everything has to be super interesting. But, there's still some fundamentals that are not exciting, that if you do them over a prolonged period of time, you'll do well. And it's not exciting. It's not worth, you're not going to get likes by talking about, compound interest, just watching paint dry, right?
No, but it's like drinking water, right? There's nothing exciting about drinking water, but we all know we have to drink, a couple of liters of water a day because it's healthy and it's important for the body to stay hydrated and everything else. You're never going to call up your buddies and say, let's go out for a glass of water.
True. That's a good point.
It's important. That's the fundamentals, right? So, and look, but it can also be fun. If somebody's listening to this and you're a parent and you have a 12, 13, 14-year-old child that you want to teach and talk to about financial literacy, if you want to talk to them about money because you see them developing habits that concern you, right? Make it real. You can make it fun, right? You can turn it into a lesson without it just being kind of a lecture of saying, don't do this, because it's not the right approach.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I like the most about the book is that you make it real and practical, because sometimes you hear where people talk about, oh, like if you save, let's say you skip drinking coffee and you save that money and it's like millions of dollars 30 years from now, right? Whatever it is. But in reality, I find that, and you point out to this in the books, like you could budget for things that are fun. So you could still drink your coffee. Because, if we apply that principle, yeah, like I'm not going to start giving myself haircuts. Like, yeah, can I save money? Sure. I can change my own oil too, right? But there are certain things that you can budget for, right? So tell me your thoughts on just the word budget, because people usually have a negative connotation to it, like dieting, right?
Yeah. So I look at it, I try to keep things simple, right? And so they're kind of the very basics of life that you should take care of first, whether it's your mortgage, your rent, car payment, food, health insurance, right? Those are that's the first thing. Now, from a budgeting perspective, I would tell you that should never be more than half of your income. And ideally should be less than a third of your income that you spend on those basic necessities, right? The
Right.
grocery store, your rent or mortgage, your car payment. As we talked about before we got started, I live in New York City. I got rid of my car because it's just a silly expense, right? But if I lived in Connecticut like I was before, you need a car. You can't get around without it, right? Or at least it's very, very difficult. So that's kind of the first bucket. The second bucket, you can almost call it pay yourself, right? Make sure that you have your retirement savings. Make sure you have what everybody calls kind of your rainy day fund, right? That's 6 months worth of expenses in the bank account, your other investments. In a perfect world, that's a third or so of your income. Now, let's be real. For most of us, certainly for me, up until my 40s, it was never a third.
Yeah, I wish.
it wasn't right. But max out your 401k at work if you have one, and especially if your employer is going to contribute or match what you're putting in. I mean, that's free money, right?
So
think about it.
Yeah.
Think about it, right? If I put $1,000 into my 401k and my employer matches 50%, that means they're giving me $500. I've got a 50% return on my investment just for free because the employer is giving it.
Plus going forward, yeah.
Plus going forward and compounding and everything else. But I'd be a fool not to take advantage of that. And so it kills me when I hear about people that say, oh, I can't afford to put into my 401k. My answer is inevitably, no, you can't afford not to.
Yeah,
right?
I like that.
Because the price that you will pay down the road for not doing it today is enormous.
Absolutely.
And then the third bucket is everything else, right? Some people like to travel. You want to go to Cancun. You want to go to the Caribbean. You want to go skiing. You want to go, I'm a big scuba diver. I just spent $1,000 on new scuba gear, right? But that's that last bucket, the fun bucket, right? That's I'm going out drinking with the boys, or I'm going out to dinner with my wife or fiance or girlfriend or whatever, right? But that needs to be the last portion. And that can't be your credit card where, as we were talking about before, you say, oh, I'm going to go out, even though I don't have the money, and spend it, and then pay the minimum payment and get charged 20% interest and never get out of that hole.
Yeah.
Right. So I think from a budgeting perspective, I keep it simple. I use 3 buckets, right? I make sure that the first one, the basic needs, is if it's over 50% of your, so again, housing, food, insurance, and transportation, if those are greater than 50% of your income, you are living beyond your means. It's that simple, right? In a perfect world, it should be under 33%. Now, granted, if you're 22 years old, you just graduated college, and you've got your first full-time job, you might be over 50% just because life is expensive and you're not making that much money yet.
Mm-hmm.
Don't despair. Don't beat yourself up over it, right? But understand where you are on that scale and work on bringing it down. In this case, work to make more money, but that doesn't mean move to a nicer place, right? That means fill up the retirement savings and the investment bucket. Go have a little fun. Look, life has to be fun. I don't understand when financial advisors say, oh, you have to save every dollar. Da, da, da. I'm like, oh my God. Like, no one's going to do that. When people say, just to use your example, oh, don't go to Starbucks. If you don't buy that $5 cup of coffee and you do that for 375 days, or 5 years, you'll save $10,000.
Right.
I know, but I want my coffee.
Right.
Because I'm a grumpy human being without my coffee. So, go ahead, fine, but budget for it and understand that that's where that money is going. And you know what? Maybe you're the type of person that when you understand that you're spending $40 a week on coffee, which translates into almost $200 a month on coffee, that you say, well, you know what, man, I can go out, with my husband or my wife or my girlfriend or my boyfriend or whatever else, right? And have a really nice dinner and a nice time with them. Or if I don't do that for 5 months, I've got $1,000 and that's that ski trip I want to take, right? So those are choices you have to be aware of, right? I'm never going to tell you what decision is the right decision or the wrong decision. But I am going to tell you that you should understand the decision that you're making and what the consequences of that decision is. Right? That's the important part. And like I said before, not investing in your retirement account, not taking advantage of your 401k with a match, and not opening up that IRA account if you don't have a 401k and contributing, the cost down the road is enormous. And we're talking millions. We're not just talking a few $1,000s. We're talking millions of dollars.
Yeah. I like the bucket system. And I think you're right, because a lot of people, as an advisor, when I first start working with people, one of the first things I do is obviously, ask them to upload copies of all their documents, including the 401k document. And there's so many times where I'm like, did you know your employer matches 5%? And I don't see a contribution in your pay. So tell me about that, And it's there. Sometimes, like I can't afford it or whatever. I'm like, listen, you're literally leaving free money on the table, right? Like we have to figure out a way to, at the very least, take advantage of that match, right? No matter what, right? Paying yourself first, because in reality, back in the day, there are some jobs that still offer pensions, right? Especially if you work in the public sector, right? Teachers and so on. But most people probably don't have a pension that they can count on for the future, right? Maybe Social Security. So it's your job to start saving for tomorrow, today. And you do it in small increments, like you said. I love that bucket system because you're in the driver's seat. It reminds me of, I have a degree in economics, reminds me of opportunity cost. You make the choice, right? So like you said, it's like, hey, I want my coffee every day or I want that $1,000 ski trip.
Yeah.
Your choice.
And if you're not a skier, you want that coffee.
Right.
But, I mean, look, there's a great saying out there that a friend of mine used to say, little nibbles add up to big bites. And so just that little bit and again, if you're somebody listening to this and you're finding yourself like, okay, I've got some credit card debt and I haven't saved for retirement and I haven't done this. And like, I know, but, right. And there's always a but in everything. Make small changes. Okay. This weekend, I'm not going to go out and spend money on dinner out. I'm going to cook at home. And what's the impact of that? Well, no, you haven't paid down your credit card, but you haven't added to your debts.
Right.
And that's a step in the right direction, right? And then maybe the next week you say, you know what, I actually really enjoyed cooking. I'm going to do that again. And now that I haven't spent money, I actually have an extra $100 in my bank account, and I'm going to pay down that debt. So again, these little moves, it's not, The problem with money is it seems overwhelming, right? Everything seems like it's a huge task and it's insurmountable if you've made some mistakes.
Right.
But it's not insurmountable. It can be fixed. It takes time, it takes effort, and little changes over time make a tremendous impact.
Yeah, agreed. I love that framing because I think it helps a lot of people think about it differently. Like, listen, yeah, if you made mistakes and you're in a situation where it feels like you can't dig yourself out of, like you said, even not adding more to it is a step in the right direction. So I really love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
And I mean, we do the same thing, right? You're an advisor, I'm an advisor. We upload the documents, we look for opportunities. But again, to go with your example, when you see a client and they don't take advantage of their 401k match, like that's a small step. And by the way, once you start, because it comes out of your paycheck automatically and is deposited into your 401k, it becomes routine. You don't even see it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even realize how much money you're saving and investing because it's automated. And that's the other thing that I think is really, really important. The more you can automate, the more it can just be automatic and just done for you, the more success you'll have because it means you don't have to do anything.
Yeah, you have to make it the least amount of effort possible.
Perfectly said. Yes.
I love that concept of automating. And it's funny because most of us automate our bills, right? For the most part, right? Like subscriptions, right? Netflix, all that stuff. So do the same with yourself, right? Pay yourself first, like you were saying.
And look at all the subscriptions you had. You know, my fiance and I moved into our apartment together last year. And we had duplicate of everything, right? We both had Netflix, we both had, Hulu and like all sorts of stuff. And we're like, okay, let's split it up. Like, I'm going to keep these 2 or 3, and you're going to keep these 2 or 3. And the only thing that we kept for ordering purposes is Amazon Prime, where we both have Amazon Prime because she orders stuff and I don't need to see her makeup orders and hair dryer and all the other stuff. And she doesn't need to see my scuba gear and espresso pods and all the other stuff. Right. But, again, those are like little things. And you know what it means? It probably saves us between the two of us $60, $70 a month. And $70 a month is $840 a year. If that's invested and it grows a little bit, you can call it $1,000 a year. And over 10 years, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember doing that with my wife as well when we first got together, a duplicate of a lot of stuff. Then eventually when we got married, right, it was like, all right, we have like 2 car insurances and 2 cell phone plans. It was a lot of stuff. And you're able to just consolidate.
Family plans on the cell phones are huge, right? I mean, you literally go from paying $100 each to paying $120 combined.
Right. It's a big difference.
It's huge.
They add up quick. Now, I wanted to ask you, how have you found the impact of social media on disrupting this kind of, what we were talking about, the discipline, the budgeting, right? Because I feel like before, you might have seen like your neighbor bought a new car, right? And maybe you want to keep up with the neighbors. But now it's everywhere. It's in your phone, right? You open up your feed and everybody's showing the photos of their meals or trips, everything, right? It's always the good stuff too.
But here's the problem, Louis. What you're saying is partially correct. It's in your face all the time and you see, but you're not seeing everything. No. You're only seeing what people want you to see. And look, when I was growing up, when I was young, it was cocktail parties, and inevitably the person you're talking to is talking about the great and wonderful investment he or she made and how much money they made with that investment. And I'm not saying they didn't. I'm saying they're not talking about the 3 other investments that went into the toilet, because nobody likes to talk about their failures. Right? So when I think about social media and I look at all the things, it's just more in your face, but it's effectively the same false narrative and false picture that's being drawn. Like, I don't care which celebrity or which influencer or who it is, you're only seeing a small fraction of reality, and you're only seeing the best part of their reality, not all the other stuff, right? There's a great picture. I enjoy the ballet and going to the ballet, and there's a great picture at the New York City Ballet of two bloody toes in a ballerina's shoes. And then a picture of the ballerina dancing and how beautiful it is. And essentially the wordings underneath say, so much pain and work goes into making it look so effortless. And I think it's the same thing in social media, right? When we watch these things, and by the way, to go back to your example, the person that just bought that new car, we don't know whether they can truly afford it or not. We just know they bought a new car.
Yeah.
And they may be mortgaging their future and hurting themselves in the long run by living beyond their means. Right? And so that's a problem that I have with social media, but it's really no different than it used to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's just more prominent now because it's in our pocket. But I love the way you frame it, where people might be mortgaging their future, and we don't see that part of it, right? Because that's not going to get any likes,
Yeah, exactly. I'm not, but in the press, there's an old saying that says nobody sends a reporter to the airport to watch a plane land safely. Right? And so everything has to be sensationalized, everything has to be dramatic. And people, when they talk about themselves, they want positive drama, not negative drama. Right? So take what you see in social media with a grain of salt and understand that you're probably only seeing 5% of the truth. And the other 95% are hard work and everything else. And I know some people who are influential and celebrities. And I can tell you, they get up at 4:00 in the morning. They work incredibly hard. As a matter of fact, I spent time with Lewis yesterday, not you, a different Lewis, who's a very, very well-known musician. He's up at 5:30 at night, and he had a late meeting last night after dinner and was, probably didn't get to go to bed until 11 p.m.
Yeah.
So that's a long day.
That
Right?
sure is.
And he's working. It's not sitting around, goofing around with his buddies and making, while that might be what you see on TikTok or on Instagram, the reality is that's 3 minutes. The other 11 hours and 57 minutes is hard work.
Yeah. What we see is a highlight reel, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, thank you. I really love the way you frame that. That's pretty powerful. I also wanted to ask you, so I know you work a lot with parents, right? How do you recommend or advise clients to balance when they have children, like between trying to give them maybe like what they didn't have growing up, but also fighting that temptation to give them everything in order to, because you want to make sure they instill good habits in them as well.
Yeah. So the first conversation I always have is everybody is different. And what that really means is you don't have to treat both of your children in the exact same way. One of your children, let's say your daughter, I'm going to use an existing client of mine as a perfect example. The daughter is very, very sensible. If you were to give her $1 million tomorrow, she would invest it, she would save it, she wouldn't spend it, she would be very, very mature and smart about it. Her older brother would probably buy 3 motorcycles, a couple of skateboards, and go tour the country with following some rock bands and blow the $1 million in 3 months. Right? So, obviously, if you are somebody who is able to give your kids money, or you want to provide for them in a way that is above, say, the necessities, the starting point is recognizing that your children are not identical. They may have different characteristics and they have different habits, and you want to take that into consideration. But, and this is really important, it's important to have an honest and transparent conversation with them about it. Right? So, in the example I just gave with the son, I'll call him John. I want to make sure that we preserve privacy, right?
Of course.
John, we know that you kind of tend to be a little bit more lively, enjoy the good life, and spend money even when you don't have it. So while we want to give you some money, and we will give you some money, we really want to be smart about it lasting. And so, as you get older and get more serious, we're going to help you buy a house. And we're going to pay for the down payment for that house for you. Whereas Sarah, we might say, hey, Sarah, we know that you're mature, so we're going to open up an investment account for you. It's going to be in your name because we know you're not going to touch it, and you're going to and mom and dad are going to continue to oversee it and manage it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same dollars, but it's being presented differently. Now, some people react badly to that. Right.
Sure.
Some kids are like, well, why can't I have it? I'm mature, even though they know they're not. Right? But that's what being a parent is about, to kind of sometimes, you know, do things that are in the children's best interest, even if they don't necessarily see or agree with it right away.
Yeah. So be willing to be the bad guy, right?
Yeah. But look, I mean, but being honest and transparent is important. Now, most of my clients are very wealthy individuals and wealthy families. So we're talking about big dollar amounts. And one of the things that I always say to them, especially when the children start getting older and getting to adulthood, almost every one of them says, well, my kids don't know exactly how much money we have. And I said, no, but they sure know that you're rich.
Right.
Right. You've got 5 BMWs and Mercedes parked in your, 8,000 square foot house. You're going to Vail skiing, in the winter for a few weeks, and you fly private plane. Like, the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah. Yeah.
They know you've got money. Not to mention, and even if you just live in a nice house, like, everybody knows Zillow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kids go online and they check what their friends or that new classmates, address is, to see what kind of house they live in.
Yeah.
Like that. So there's no secrecy. And trying to keep something secret that's already kind of half out there can be very, very damaging. And so transparency, I think, is incredibly important.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I like the fact that you advise to separate, the fact that not both kids will be the same. So you can definitely go about it differently.
Yeah.
For sure. No, I love it. So I want to be respectful of your time. So before I let you go, I remember when we first met, you weren't big on cell phones, but I would imagine probably not as big on social media either. But if anyone wants to reach out to you or find out more about you, what would be the best place to kind of like look you up?
Wealthspire, my firm, Wealthspire, and I'm sure you'll list it on.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the
link. All my contact info is there. It's Oliver Pursche, oliver.pursche@wealthspire.com. But there'll be links there. I think that's the best way to reach me if you have any questions. And I'm always happy to respond. And I think giving advice, it's a privilege to be able to give advice and having people ask you for advice and guidance. And that's how you and I met at our conference when you talked about the internship program that you guys and your firm offers. And I think that's wonderful. And it's an opportunity to pass on knowledge and pass on experiences. And, the recipient can then make their determination how they want to use that. But, if anybody has questions, has follow-ups, by all means, reach out to me via email or phone. All the contact information is there. I do have a cell phone. I just, to my fiance's chagrin, I don't always have it on. I'm happy to leave the house even for a weekend without bringing my cell phone. I'm not an emergency medical doctor that
right. Not a brain surgeon on call.
Yeah, exactly. So
what about the book? Where can we get?
So the book, just go to my website, oliverpursche.com, and you can order it there via Amazon. You can contact me directly as well. And by all means.
Yeah, and I'm putting the link in the show notes so people can just click on it, go directly to it as well.
Perfect. Yeah.
Thank you. So I had one last question for you. You had mentioned in the book, it was one of the things that caught my attention. You said that you basically, there were certain things that you wish you knew then, right? As you were younger, which I'm sure a lot of us wish that we knew then what we know now, right?
Sure.
So in the spirit of that, I want you to imagine yourself in an elevator. I know you live in a high rise, right? In a high rise. So a total stranger hops in the elevator with you. They're going to be with you for maybe 30 seconds, right? 45 seconds. You're never going to see them again. They don't know your name or the link to your website or anything. What if they ask you, what were some things that you would like to share they say, hey, here's what I wish I knew then that I know now, or anything that you'd like to share with them just to better their lives in general, whether it's money related or just life advice?
Everything has a consequence. Every decision that you make has a consequence. And in many cases, that consequence may not be fully felt for years upon years down the road. So I would say to anyone, if I was talking to my younger self at age 19 or 20, the decisions you make now will have an impact when you're 50, even though you can't imagine being 50 because you're 19. And so one of my regrets from a financial perspective is I didn't understand the power of time and the power of compounding at a young age. And had I been smarter and just saved a little bit more, invested a little bit more, and I'm lucky that I'm doing fine and I'm financially comfortable, but it would have looked very, very differently had I done that. And again, you make mistakes, and one of the things I talk about in my book is even later in life, you make mistakes. I bought a 4,000 square foot 4-bedroom house, and then when the financial crisis hit in 2008, 2009, and I found myself when my income went down because that's what happened in those when the market corrects by 50% and your income is based on the market.
You manage money, you're gonna feel it.
It was a stretch, and I never imagined and never thought at age 34 when I bought the house, like, oh my God, I'm buying a house that really is beyond my means, even though I can afford it today, and I could afford it when I bought it, but 5 years later, it was a struggle.
Yeah.
I managed through it, right? But it was tough. And so I would say, just keep in mind, everything has consequences, and time amplifies everything. It amplifies the good and the bad.
Yeah.
So making small, good decisions will have a huge positive impact down the road.
Yeah, those are some powerful words. And it reminds me of when you were talking about the bucket system and like what you just shared now about the apartment. It was like, sometimes you could afford something, and maybe, like you're saying, think about the consequence that it could have down the line.
And keep in mind, right, whether it's the bank that's giving you a mortgage, the car dealership that's giving you financing on the car, or the credit card company, everybody's in business to maximize their own profits and try to get you to spend as much as possible, even if it's not the right thing. So just because you qualify for a $10,000 credit limit, or you qualify for a $30,000 car loan, or you qualify for a $500,000 mortgage, doesn't mean you should take it.
Very true. Agreed. No, thank you so much, Oliver. This has been great.
Thank you. This was fun.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. Thank you for taking the time. It was a pleasure meeting you. I hope to, hopefully keep getting invited to the conference and seeing you in person again.
I look forward to it.
Thank you so much. Well, you have a great weekend.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you have any questions, send us an email, luis@onmywaytowealth.com, and be sure to check out the show notes where I have all the links for Oliver's book and his contact information as well. Thank you. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to On My Way to Wealth. If you have any questions, please send me an email at luis@onmywaytowealth.com. The information provided here is for information and education purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of myself, unless otherwise specifically cited. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by my firm or myself about other parties' information or accuracy or completeness. All information or ideas provided should be discussed in detail with a financial advisor, accountant, or legal counsel prior to implementation. Thank you.